Hello, I'm Roger Royle. Now, travelling around London, you need to have your wits about you. You really do these days. But the Mayor of London and Transport for London have come together and made it a little bit easier for us, which is a real joy. They've given names to 6 new train lines, and they'll be these train lines that are crisscrossing the whole of the capital. Let me give you the names of those train lines. The Liberty Line, the Lioness Line, the Mildmay Line, the Suffragette Line, the Weaver Line, and the Windrush Line. And with me is someone who finds one of those names particularly significant. Sir Cliff Richard.
Hello, how are
Cliff,
you?
it's super to see you. But as I say, one of those names is significant to you.
Mildmay.
Excellent.
Yes.
Now, we'll go into that later on, but can I ask a few things before? Cliff, have you retired?
No, I get tired, but I decided not to retire, because if you retire and then you want to make another album, it's considered a comeback. So what I thought is that one day maybe I'll just stop, like you do it at red light.
Yes.
And then when it goes green, you go, let's go. So if I just stop, it means I don't have to make a comeback. If I want to do something, I just show up again and everybody goes, oh, I thought he was dead.
I mean, that is very, very wise. But you've been marvellous. You've kept fit. You've loved your tennis. You've done your exercising. All that has been good, hasn't it?
Yes, I mean, all of those things. Again, it's easier when you become someone like me, because you have more money than you had when your father and mother were alive. I mean, we lived in a council house, so there was nothing in the future for us other than to get a job somewhere. But I got lucky because my first record I made when I was 17. I'd only just left school the autumn of the year before. And so for me, suddenly the world opened up, because I was dreaming of being like Elvis and Little Richard and Buddy Holly. And so when it happened so quickly, the Shadows and I, we'd sit and talk and we'd say, oh, fantastic, we'd do a show, had to go into a bar or something, meet up with the band. And we thought, do you think we're going to be 50 years old? I mean, 50, but at the age of 17, 15 seemed like ancient. So we said, no, we'll never live to be that old. And so it's for me unbelievable that only last year I did my show called Blue, Sapphire Blue. And I'm thinking, I don't know how long I can go on. As long as I can sing, I suppose. And none of us actually we can't maintain the voice of a 17-year-old. So I've, over the years, because I've recorded yearly all the way through, I can feel or tell when I shouldn't do that song in that key. It's just a little too high. I mean, there's a song called We Don't Talk Anymore, and in the solo, I do a falsetto that is, ah! That may have been it. Yeah. But generally speaking, I can only do it once in the first concert. Right. And then after that, it's harder to do that. So I've had to fight the fact that age does have its effect.
It does have. But let's go back to the very beginning. Were you singing as a very young child?
I got a letter from Australia from a girl, a fan, and she said, I have a letter that you wrote me. And I said, I didn't really know her. And she sent me the letter. And I read it and I thought, that's when the teacher was trying to get us to talk and speak English properly. And they felt it was good that you should write properly. And in the class, I had written to, I can't remember her name, Dear Frida, let's say. Dear Frida, my name is Harry Roger Webb. I go to the Cheshunt Secondary Modern School and my ambition is to be a famous singer. And I was 12 and a half years old. I don't remember at that age, but I wrote it.
Brilliant. But what were your parents saying that? Can't you get a proper job?
No, they never got to that, because at 12 and a half, I wasn't going to get a job for at least another 5 years. So it just grew. And of course, when Elvis happened, and the Everly Brothers, and Little Richard, Buddy Holly, all those people.
The richness of that time.
Oh, it was unbelievable. I wrote a book about the people that influenced me and who impressed me a lot. and it was called A Head Full of Music. And the thing is, I described it as a tsunami of music that came from America. We can never take it away from them. They created rock and roll.
But didn't that frighten you in any way?
No, it kind of inspired me.
Brilliant.
Again, of course, at 17, and when I heard Elvis, I think I was 15, 14 and a half, 15. And I kept thinking, oh God, this is fantastic. And managed to save up, I think it was 4 shillings and sixpence to have a single.
Oh, you were splashing out.
I know. But you get the first Elvis record, Heartbreak Hotel. And then when there was talk about an album, I had to save up. My dad used to give me 3p a week, pocket money, 3 pence. It was a fortune for a 15-year-old. And so slowly I saved my money, and when Elvis had his first album out, which was just called Elvis Presley in pink and green, with a black and white picture of him playing the guitar, I went out and bought it. And I can still remember it. The guy put it in a brown paper bag. As soon as I got outside, I took it off, wrapped it up, threw it in the bin. I said, no, I want people to see that. I've got Elvis's album under my arm.
Absolutely marvellous. But, I mean, it was exciting at that time. But, you know, getting back to Mildmay, with you mentioning about Mildmay, we're both patrons of Mildmay.
Yes.
How do you feel about that?
I feel good about it. I mean, I felt, you know, it was frightening when AIDS came in all those years ago, and Mildmay jumped into that. And that made me feel good, because you read about it. You read about thousands of people dying with AIDS, and there was the hospital. And of course, I know it's not just that now. It's a hospital that caters for people who are unwell.
But when the AIDS and the HIV were coming out, they were really sort of talked of as a plague and things like this. So people were incredibly fearful.
Well,
so Mildmay was the first hospital in Europe for people with AIDS.
I know, and that's what impressed me, because not that I knew anybody who was dying of AIDS. I still don't think I've met anybody, and then they've died of AIDS. But we read it. We knew what it was. We knew how it happens. And yet you felt, oh my God, I don't understand this. But when a hospital comes into it, and now, of course, I've read they have now pills people can take.
It's very different now.
Yes.
And this in a way has made things difficult, because when the AIDS epidemic was about, then the NHS was backing Mildmay and backing totally. But then when the treatment came, and this wasn't so needed, so the NHS pulled away from Mildmay, which meant that, you know, the money wasn't coming in that was originally coming in from the NHS. So that was very difficult. But then they realised the NHS weren't going to come back full time, but were going to turn Mildmay into, in a way, a sort of cottage hospital and a hospice, because at one time people went to Mildmay to die.
Yes.
And so they were getting very good end-of-life care. But now, as you mentioned earlier, it is much broader.
Yes.
Alcoholics, drug addicts, people without houses, people living on the streets, as there may be now with people coming out of prison. And Mildmay has adapted itself so as to be this caring community.
Well, you know, I'm sure most people who are at my industry and survive, it's the same thing. You have to learn how to survive. You have to learn to grow up to meet it, and then, if necessary, embrace whatever comes your way. And so I still think that Mildmay it's a great name, and it should be always remembered. And I'm so glad that a train line is going to be called.
It is fantastic. And also, it takes people into the history of London.
Yes.
I mean, people wouldn't, yes, they may know that Mildmay had a hospital, but they wouldn't know all the business of the background and how it. I mean, Mildmay's 160 years old. Oh my now that's God. Older than the two of us put together.
I know, thank goodness for that.
There always needs to be charity.
Yes.
And what worries me, Cliff, is that the church communities aren't as large as they were.
No.
Numbers have gone down. But my faith means a lot to me, as you know, and your faith means a lot to you.
Oh, yes.
How have you felt that has been part of your life?
Well, that was a very big part of my life originally. I mean, I was terrified when Billy Graham invited me. I'd only been
I remember that.
Yes, at Earl's Court, I think it was. But I'd only been a Christian for a couple of weeks. And he'd read about it somewhere. And he said, would you come and say something when I come to London? And my friend said, look, if you don't want to do it, don't do it. I said, yeah, but maybe I do want to do it. And so I said yes. And then I found myself, as the day came nearer, I got more and more terrified. And then Dr. Graham was being criticized for over-emotional approach when he asked people to come forward. So I thought, I'll go and see him 2 days before I'm on. And I went, sat upstairs and muffled up and watched.
And you never met him before?
No.
Right.
No, and he did not emotionalize. He just said, at the end, he said, look, if anything I've said has made you interested and you want to talk to somebody about it, there are people standing at the front, make yourself known, and then you can ask them the questions you want to ask. And later, of course, I did 2 or 3 more with him, and he'd always say, and just remember this, there are people here that you can come and talk to. You're not coming to meet me or Cliff Richard. He said, you're going to talk to these people about spirituality. And so I found I was very impressed by him, actually.
And you feel it sustained you personally throughout your life?
Yes, I mean, I think it happened really a long time ago, but I didn't feel anything. I remember going to bed one night and thinking, look, okay, they say that if you stand at the door and knock, Jesus is quoted as standing at the door and knocking, and if you open the door, I will come in. And I'm thinking, I lay in bed and I didn't pray in those days, but I did say, okay, I know what I believe now. I believe in you. I would trust you if you were standing beside me. And so I want to take the step. I'm opening the door. Now, what I wish had happened, I wanted
yes,
a stack of lightning.
I told you about going over the top again.
I know. But in the end, you see, it was 6 months later, and I'd been a Christian that long. I'd met some Christians and started going to a church in Finchley. And I was in Paris with the Shadows and in the theatre there. And I came down from the hotel right next door, and I always used to have a cup of coffee there. And I sat there having coffee, watching the world go by in France with lots of fancy clothes on ladies and men pretty smart. And somebody came up and said, hi, Cliff. And it was somebody I'd met years ago. Yeah. And he sat, we talked, and he said, you've changed. And I said, what do you mean I've changed? He said, well, you haven't sworn at all. And that reminded me that I did swear a lot before I became a Christian, every sort of word. And I'm thinking, oh, and that's what made me think, oh, maybe Jesus has changed me in some way.
So it gave you a freshness and a wholesomeness.
Yeah. So I felt more comfortable in my faith. And then, of course, when Billy asked me, I keep saying, Dr. Graham, I'm sure he forgives me. But Dr. Graham asked me to join 2 or 3 other times, once in Japan, funnily enough. But I was really happy to do it because I felt my faith had put its arms around me. I didn't feel uncomfortable saying Jesus. You know, sometimes when I think back as a child, I didn't go to church. My parents made me go to a church. And when I came back one day saying, look, I don't understand what they're talking about, and they didn't force me back. So when I became a singer, when you did a tour, and before I was a Christian, you'd talk about politics, sex, and religion.
Right.
Not necessarily in that order, no. But it was always the way on the coach. It would always be the conversation with the band and other acts that were on the show. And it was interesting that I got caught up more and more on the religious aspect, on the God thing. And then I met a group of people who, in the Finchley Church, and I went to meetings that they had, and everything they spoke about was so simple. You know, Christianity isn't complicated.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's about love.
It's all about
It's
love.
about being valued.
Absolutely,
Yes.
yeah. And yet you can get nations now that don't seem to show any love.
Yeah.
And you wonder how we're ever going to get peace in the world unless you can. The one thing that I really got from the Bible was you can't have an enemy if you forgive your enemy. The trouble is you need them to forgive you.
Yes.
Because you can't have it. If you forgive your enemy, he's no longer an enemy.
Yeah.
And that hit me very early.
Cliff, one of the people who had a huge impact on Mildmay and is still very much remembered because she in fact visited the place 3 times for official duties, but another 12 times or even more than that to just go and see people and see patients. And that was Princess Diana. Why do you think she reached out like that?
I met her a few times, not often. She impressed me in many ways, and she was very kind. She did take the boys to meet people with AIDS, which was unheard of, and she would cuddle them and everything. And so
that was the main thing.
Yes.
There was that photograph taken where she was shaking someone's hand,
That's right.
and that broke down a huge barrier, didn't it?
Absolutely. And I thought it was terrific that when I went to a party of a friend of mine, he had met her a few times and had invited her to dinner. And I sat next to Diana. And at the end of it, she said to Charles, do you have marigold gloves here? And he said, no, I don't think so. Well, why do you want them? She said, I thought I'd help wash up. And she wanted marigold gloves, and I thought I didn't think that any of the royal family would know what marigold gloves were.
And the other very interesting thing was that the present Mildmay was actually opened by Prince Harry.
Oh, really?
And so if he'd been introduced
Yes.
by his mother, he would feel safe in going back to
Oh,
that.
absolutely.
I think this is one of the reasons why you've been attracted to Mildmay, and I was attracted to Mildmay, because anyone who needed care has had the care from Mildmay.
Yeah.
If Mildmay could give the care, it would give it. And also, it's adapted. As we've mentioned, things have so changed in caring for people.
Oh, yes.
That Mildmay has gone along with that care. And it's something to, it's a nice train to ride on.
Yes, and it's nice to think that it's done. You can't have that happen unless there's love.
Yes.
If you are passionate about helping someone, it comes from loving them, loving humanity, and so Mildmay really is a standout thing.
Mildmay is a good place.
Oh, it's a very good place, and of course the motivation is so good.
Will you really be absolutely super? Thanks. I know you haven't got your glasses with you. I want you to date this photograph, if you will.
Oh, I saw that photograph, and I'm very thrilled. I have no idea where it is. When people say to me, "You haven't changed it," or so, I'm going to say, "Take a look at this."
You've weathered very well.
Very
weathered
well, is a good word. I have weathered pretty well, but when I look back, people say you haven't changed. I want to show them those photographs when I was 17. Oh yes, I have, and it's got Mildmay above my head.
in the back.
I love it.
So they do love it, and we love you.
Roger, so much.
Thank you very much indeed.
And nice to
Cliff.
see you again after all these years.